Okay, so we have been going forwards, now we're going to turn around and go backwards. So this right here is a multiplication problem, and you have got to distribute the 4 to both of these terms in the parentheses. Okay, in the parentheses you have two terms, so it's a binomial. Your biggest degree is 2, so it's a quadratic binomial. So if you multiply both these by 4, 4 times 3x is going to be 12x squared. And then if you do 4 multiplied by the negative 5x, that's a negative 20x. And that's our answer. So our answer is a binomial, and our biggest degree is 2, so it's a quadratic binomial. Okay, now when you multiply, the answer is called the product. And these two things that you times together are called factors. That's a factor, and this binomial is a factor. So I multiply two factors together, and the answer is a product. Now, we're going to go backwards. I'm going to give you the product, and you have got to determine what its factors are. Okay, we're going to factor by using the greatest common factor, the GCF. So you look at your numbers, look at 24 and 27, and you want to find something they have in common, and you want to find the greatest factor that they have in common. And it is going to be, you can divide them both by 3. So if you divide both of these by 3, 3 is going to be the greatest common factor. And now you look at your letters, this has n to the 5, it's got 5 of them, and this has just n to the 1. So the greatest that they have in common, I can divide, I got to pull the same amount out of each, and I want to take as many as I can from both of them. And this has 5 and this has 1, so I can only take away 1 from each. So this 3n is going to be my greatest common factor. So if I divide both of these by 3n, so a negative 24 n to the 5th, if I divide that by 3n, negative 24 divided by 3 is a negative 8, and n to the 5th divided by n to the 1, one of these n's on bottom is going to cancel one of these n's on top, so it's going to be n to the 4. And then if I divide the negative 27m by 3n, a negative 27 divided by 3 is a negative 9, and n divided by n is just undoes, it's nothing. Okay, so these two are going to be what I times this 3m by. So let's write it as a times problem. If you write this as a times problem, so this is my answer. And right here, this factor, I'm going to put my 3n. So it's going to be 3n multiplied by a binomial. And I'm going to put this guy here, a negative 8n to the 4, and I'm going to put this minus 9 here. So I just rewrote this as a times problem, and you can check it to see if it, when you times it, if you do get this for an answer. So that's my answer right there, negative 24 n to the 5th minus 27n. So if I times this 3n to a negative 8, 3 times a negative 8 is a negative 24, and n to the 1 times n to the 4 is n to the 4 plus 1, that's n to the 5. And then when I times it to the negative 9, 3n times negative 9 is going to be a negative 27n. And that is the exact same as this. So these are my factors. Okay, so let's try it like this. This negative 3m to the 5 plus 4m cubed, let's write it as a times problem. Okay, 3 and 4 have nothing in common. You can only divide them by 1, and you don't even really need to write a 1. So let's look at your letters, m's. This has m to the 5 and this has m to the 3. So I want to divide as many out as I can, and I can take away from both at least 3 of the m's. So that's going to be one of my factors. That's going to be the greatest common factor. So m cubed times what? Okay, now in front of m is just 1. So the question is 1 multiplied by what is a negative 3? So it's got to be a negative 3 here. and I need, in my answer, I need to have m to the 5th. I need 5 m's, and right here I've got 3. So m cubed times what? How many m's do I need here for them to total and give you 5? And it's got to be 2. Okay, now let's do the other one. 1 multiplied by what is going to give me a 4? And that is just a 4. And then I need, with my 4, I need in the answer m to the 3. I need 3 of them. So m to the 3 times what is going to be m to the 3, and that's just a 1. And you don't even need to write it because 4 times 1 is just 4. So your answer is going to be m cubed. If you rewrite this as factors, one of them is n cubed and the other one is a negative 3m squared plus 4. Okay, the next one. So if we've got 60 and 10, I can divide them both by 2, I can divide them both by 5. I want to divide them both by the greatest amount possible. I can divide them both by 10. So I'm going to divide both those by 10. Okay, now let's look at your letters, your x's. I've got 4 x's right here and I've got 3 x's here. So I want to pull out as many from both as I can, and the greatest amount I can take away from each is x cubed. And my y's, I've got y to the 1 here and I got y squared there. So the greatest amount of y's I can pull out from each is just going to be y to the 1. So this is one of my factors. This is the greatest common factor. So I'm going to multiply it by a binomial. So 10 multiplied by what is 60? 10 times 6 is 60. And I need in the answer, I need x to the 4. And so x cubed times how many x's will give me a total of 4 x's. So I need x to the 1 here and y1 here, and I only need y1 in the answer, so y1 times what will give me y1? And that is just a 1, and I'm not even going to write it. So now I'm going to put a plus. Okay, now 10 times what is a 10? And that is just a 1. X cubed times what is x cubed? And that's just a 1 again, I'm not going to write it. And y to the 1 times what is y squared? I need a total of 2 y's. So I got 1 here. So that's y. Okay, try these other two. Push pause, try them on your own, and then push play to check your answer. Okay, this one, a negative 10 and 5. What goes into both of those? You can divide them both by 5. And now let's do your letters. Y, if I got 7 of them and I got 3 of them, I can take 3 away from both. So it's going to be y cubed. Okay, z's, I got 3 z's here. I got 2 here, so I can take 2 away from both. And I have some x's here, but I do not have any x's here. So they have no x's in common. So this is it right here. This is my greatest common factor. So 5y cubed z squared times what? 5 times what is going to end up in a negative 10? It's going to be negative 2. I need 7 y's in my answer. So y to the 3 times how many y's? Y to the 4. I need 3 z's in my answer, and I got 2 here, so it's going to be 1 z. Okay, now 5 times what is 5? That's just a 1. I'm not even going to write it. I need 3 y's in my answer, and I got 3 y's here, so that's another 1. I need 2 z's, and I got 2 z's, so that's another 1. The only thing I need is x squared. Okay, last one, 28 and 35. You can divide them both by 7. So 7, this has an A, this has an A. I'm going to divide by an A. This has 4 B's, this has 1 B, so I can take 1 B out of each. And then that's it. So 7 times what is 28? 7 times 4 is 28. I need 1 A in my answer. I got 1, so I'm no A's. I need 4 B's, and I've got 1, so I need 3 here. And 7 times what is a minus 35, so it's going to be minus 5. A in my answer and I've got one, B in my answer and I've got one, so that's it. That is your answer. Okay. Now, the next type. Here we go. We have been doing a lot of multiplication, so let's times these through. There's 3 types, and there's 4 types. So type 1 is where it's plus and plus. So if you times, you get x squared. If you times x by 2, you get 2x. If you times 3 to x, you get 3x. If you times 3 to 2, you get 6. If you combine your terms, you get x squared. 2x plus 3x is 5x, and then plus 6. Now, if you have a positive and a positive, if everything is positive, that means everything in your factors are positive. So these are your factors. This is a factor right here, the x plus 3, and this is a factor, your x plus 2. And this is the answer, so this is the product. So in the product, everything is positive. That means everything in your factors are positive. Now let's look at these factors. These are negative, negative, minus, minus. So x minus 4 and x minus 3, now you got some negatives. So if you have x times x, that's going to give you x squared. If you have x times a minus 3, that's going to give you a minus 3x. If you have a minus 4 times x, that's going to give you a minus 4x. If you have a minus 4 times a minus 3, that's going to give you a plus 12. Okay, now you add your middle pieces, a negative 3 and a negative 4, so you got x squared minus 7x plus 12. So now look what happens. If you have a minus minus, these are both going to be negative, and when you add a negative to a negative, it's just going to be a negative. But when you times them, if you do this last times the last, a negative 4 times a negative 3 is a positive 12. So, type 2, if you have both negatives, minus minus, only your middle is negative. You get the last from multiplying. And if you multiply a negative by a negative, it's going to be positive. So this is type 2. Okay, type 3, let's do one of each. Let's do 1 plus and 1 minus. So x times x, that's x squared. X times a minus 2 is a minus 2x. 5 times x is a plus 5x. 5 times a negative 2 is a negative 10. Okay, now let's add our middles. So a negative 2x and a plus 5x, that's x squared plus 3x minus 10. Okay, now if you have one of each, if you have one positive and one negative, your last is always going to be negative because it comes from multiplication. If you times a positive by a negative, it's always going to be a negative. But our middle is positive because the bigger number was positive. We have more positives. 5 positives versus 2 negatives. So you have way more positives. So your answer when you add them is going to be positive. So if the middle is positive and the last is negative, that means you got one of each. And your bigger number is positive. Okay, type 4, you got one of each again. You got a negative 7, you got a positive 3. So if you do x times x, that's going to be x squared. If you have x times 3, that's going to be 3x. If you do a negative 7 times x, that's a negative 7x. If you do a negative 7 times 3, that's a negative 21. Okay, now if you add up your middles, a 3x and a negative 7x, so we're going to go x squared, add those up, that's going to be a negative 4x, and then a minus 21. So your end, this is the only way you get both negatives. If your end is negative, that means one of each, one positive, one negative, because positive times negative is negative. But your middle, if your middle is negative, that means when you add these, you had more negatives than you did positives. Okay, so there's 4 types. The first one's easy. If everything's positive, everything's positive. Type 2, if everything in your factors are negative, that means your middle is negative and your last is going to be positive. Type 3, if you got one of each, if your bigger number is positive, your middle is going to be positive, your last is going to be negative. Because a positive times negative is a negative. And your type 4, if your middle is negative, that means your bigger number was negative, so your last is also going to be negative because a positive times negative is a negative. Okay, so let's look at some of these. Now, here we go. This is the product. You got to come up with 2 factors that multiply and give you this product. So, it is going to be just like these factors right here. You've got to give me these two factors. So it's going to be a binomial times a binomial. And here we go. How do you get a squared? Well, you just do a and a. Okay, this one right here, the middle is negative, but the last is positive. So that is type 2. Because look, my middle is negative, but my last one is positive. So that's going to be type 2. That means if it's type 2, they are both negatives. Okay, now you have to know your multiplication tables. If you don't know your multiplications, if your skills are weak, this is going to be hard for you. Now, you get 20 by multiplying, and you get 12 by adding. So 20, there's only a couple ways to times and get 20. 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. So you got 3 choices. And you need to look at the middle. It will tell you which of those 3 you got to choose. When you add them together, it needs to be a negative 12. So you're going to go with the 2 and the 10. And they both have to be negative, because a negative 2 multiplied by a negative 10 is a positive 20. But a negative 2 add a negative 10 is a negative 12. That's how they're getting the negative 12, and that's how they're getting the positive 20. Okay, the order does not matter. It doesn't matter which one you put the 10 in or which one you put the 2 in. The only thing that matters is the signs. So if you think that's what you've got, go ahead and multiply it, and if you get that answer, then you got it right. So a times a is a squared. A times minus 10 is a minus 10a. Minus 2 times a is a minus 2a, and a minus 2 times minus 10 is a plus 20. And add your middles, a negative 10 and a negative 2. So we got a squared minus 12a plus 20. Okay, that's it. Let's look at the next one. Okay, the next one. You need to multiply. And how you multiply and get n squared is easy, n and n. Okay, now look, it's a minus and a minus. So, a minus and a minus is this last type 4. Because that's a minus, that's a minus. Now type 4, you got one of each. One's a plus, one's a negative. One's a positive, one's a negative. But your middle, when you add them, when you add your middle, the answer is negative because your bigger number is negative. You have more negatives. So let's look and see. I need to times and get a negative 12. Okay, there's only a couple ways to times and get 12. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And the only way you can times and get a negative is if one of them is plus and one of them is minus. One of them is positive, one of them is negative. Okay, you add to get the middle, and the middle is a minus 1. So which one of these am I going to add, and it's going to give me a minus 1. And then you're going to go with the 3 and the 4. Okay, now the question is the 3 positive and the 4 negative? Or is the 3 negative and the 4 positive? And you have to go with the 3 is positive and the 4 is negative. So times them. 3 times a negative 4 equals negative 12. But add them. 3 plus a negative 4 equals negative 1. When you add them, it's got to give you the middle. Okay, pause it. Try these two on your own. Then push play and see if you match up. Okay, this one. Here we go. Look what we've got. We've got a negative. The only way to times and get a negative 32 is if one of them is plus and one of them is minus. Your middle is positive, so that means when you added them, you must have had more positives than negatives. Okay, this one's pretty easy. To get x squared, you go xx. And I know one of them's plus and I know one of them's minus. Okay, 32. There's more ways to times and get 32. 32, you can use 1 and 32. You can use 2 and 16. 4 and 8. Is that it? Maybe just 3 ways. 1, 32, 2, 16, 4, and 8. Okay, that's it. So 3 ways. Now when you add them, you got to get a 4. So it's got to be negative 32. That means one's plus, one's minus. We don't know which one. And I add to get 4, so you're going right here. You can combine a 4 and an 8 to get 4. So the question is it 4 subtract 8 or is it 8 subtract 4? When you add them, 4 subtract 8 is negative 4, 8 subtract 4 is 4, and I want this one right here. I've got to add them and get 4, but I got to times them. 8 times a negative 4, and that gives me a negative 32. So I've got a plus 8 and a minus 4. Okay, the last one, 30, times and get 30. So list my options for 30. That's 1 and 30. That's 2 and 15. That's 3 and 10. And that's 5 and 6. So I got 4 options now. So only one of those 4 will work. It's a minus 30, so that means when I multiply, one of them's got to be plus, one of them's got to be minus. But when I add them, I end up with a positive 7. So that means I end up with more. I've got more positives. So what is going to add and give me 7, and at the same time times and give me 30? So of these 4 options, I like this one right here, 3 and 10. One of them has to be negative. So is it 10 subtract 3 or is it 3 subtract 10? 10 subtract 3 is 7. 3 subtract 10 is negative 7. So it's going to be v plus 10 and v minus 7. Okay, your homework. One of them's a few of them are problems that look like this. X squared minus 4x. Okay, this is 1, and then we've got x squared minus 25. Okay, let's look at this first one. X squared minus 4x. They are missing the last term. They've got the x squared and they got the middle, but they don't have a number. On this one, x squared minus 25, they are missing the middle. They don't have any x's, but they've got a number on the end. So here we go. This one right here is GCF. Use the GCF. Let's figure out what they've got in common. What is common to x squared minus 4x? What can you divide both of these by? You can divide them both by an x. So if you divide them both by x, it's going to be x times what is x squared? X times x. And x times what is a minus 4x, and that's just a minus 4. Okay, now this one. What is going to times and give you a negative 25? You only have 2 options. 25, you can do 1 and 25, or you can do 5 and 5. So it's got to times give you negative 25. That means one of them's positive, one of them's negative. But it's got to add and give you 0. Nothing in the middle. It canceled out. So that's going to be this, plus 5 and a minus 5. Plus 5 times negative 5 is negative 25, but you add them together and it's 0. So it's going to be x plus 5 and x minus 5. Okay, your homework is the worksheet. Get it done. If you finish with the worksheet, you need to do IXL, Algebra 1, and once you do AA2.